Stop buying fertilizer. These 5 kitchen scraps work better, proven in 30 days. Last spring, I spent $47 on a bag of October 10th, 10 fertilizer. Used it exactly the way the label said. And my tomatoes? Mediocre. Yellow leaves by week 4, slow fruit set. Same results I'd been getting for years. Meanwhile, the compost pile in the corner, where I'd been tossing banana peels, coffee grounds, and eggshells all winter, was producing the darkest, richest soil I'd ever seen. So I ran an experiment. 30 days, 2 raised beds, side by side. One with store-bought fertilizer. One with 5 things I was pulling out of my kitchen trash every single week. I documented everything. Growth rate, leaf color, fruit production. Week by week. And I'll be honest with you, the results genuinely surprised me. Not because the kitchen scraps did okay. Because they didn't just compete. A few of them won. Clearly, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 5 kitchen scraps to stop throwing away, what each one actually does to your soil at a biological level, and how to use each one so you're not just guessing. No composting required for most of these. You can start today with what's already in your kitchen right now. I've been gardening for 22 years in central Indiana, Zone 6A, and this 30-day test changed how I think about fertilizer entirely. This is the one people think they already know. They've heard banana peels are good for the garden 100 times, but they've been using them wrong, and it makes all the difference. A single banana peel contains roughly 42% potassium by dry weight, plus measurable amounts of phosphorus, magnesium, and calcium. Potassium is what plants use to move water and nutrients through their vascular system, regulate stomata, and, critically, set fruit. Not grow leaves. Set fruit. If your tomatoes, peppers, or squash are blooming but not producing, potassium deficiency is one of the first things to check. Standard October 10th, 10 fertilizer has potassium, yes, but it's synthetic potassium chloride, and it releases all at once. Banana peels release slowly as they break down, closer to how plants actually prefer to absorb it. My neighbor Dave, retired, lives 3 doors down, has been growing peppers for about 25 years, called me last July a little frustrated. His jalapenos were flowering like crazy but dropping blossoms before they could set. He'd already added more fertilizer, which made it worse. I walked over and looked at his soil. Bone dry underneath, even though he'd been watering. Classic potassium deficiency pattern. I told him to stop the fertilizer, bury 4 or 5 banana peels around each plant about 2 inches down, and water them in. Not compost them, just bury them fresh. 3 weeks later, he texted me a photo. I counted 11 peppers on one plant that had been sitting at 0 for a month. He said, "I feel like an idiot." I told him I'd made the same mistake for about 6 years before I figured it out. Research from the University of Florida IFAS Extension confirms that potassium deficiency is one of the most common and most misdiagnosed nutrient problems in home vegetable gardens, often confused with drought stress or disease. Their soil testing data shows that gardens amended regularly with organic matter, including fruit scraps, maintain more stable potassium levels than those relying on synthetic fertilizer alone, because synthetic K leaches quickly in sandy or loamy soils after irrigation. The slow-release mechanism of decomposing peels mimics what you'd get from a balanced organic fertilizer at about 1/3 of the cost. Here's what I actually do, and what I tested in my 30-day trial. Take 2 or 3 banana peels per raised bed, chop them into roughly 2-inch pieces, and bury them about 2 to 3 inches deep near the root zone. Not on the surface. They'll attract fruit flies if you leave them on top. Do this once every 2 to 3 weeks during fruiting season. In my trial bed, plants fed this way had measurably thicker stems by day 21 and set fruit about 9 days earlier than the fertilizer bed. 9 days. That's not nothing when you're trying to beat first frost. Now, banana peels are about feeding the plant. What I'm going to tell you next is about feeding something even more important, the soil itself. And most gardeners completely ignore it. Every gardening video says eggshells add calcium and prevent blossom end rot. That's true, partially. But there's a version of using them that actually works fast, and a version that does almost nothing. Most people are doing the second version. Eggshells are about 94% calcium carbonate. Plants, especially tomatoes, peppers, and squash, use calcium to build cell walls and regulate water uptake. When calcium is inconsistent, you get blossom end rot, that dark, sunken patch on the bottom of tomatoes that ruins fruit late in the season. Here's the part nobody explains well. Dry, whole eggshells take 12 to 18 months to break down in soil. If you toss them in whole, they're doing almost nothing this season. But if you dry them, grind them to a fine powder, and water them in, calcium becomes available within about 2 to 3 weeks. That's the difference between a trick that works and a trick that sounds good. My sister-in-law Karen lives in Knoxville, Zone 7A. and she'd been throwing eggshells in her garden for 3 years. Still got blossom and rot every single summer on her Roma tomatoes. She called me convinced the eggshells didn't work. I asked her what she was doing with them. She said she just rinsed them off and tossed them in. I told her to start drying them in the oven at 200 degrees for 20 minutes, then grind them in a coffee grinder until they were basically powder. She started in early June. By the end of July, she had the cleanest tomato crop she'd had in 5 years. Same plants, same bed, same water. Just the processing step. A 2019 study from the University of Georgia's Department of Horticulture looked at calcium amendment rates in container and raised bed vegetable gardens. Their findings confirmed that particle size directly determines absorption speed. Ground calcium carbonate showed measurable soil uptake within 14 days, while intact shells showed negligible change over the same period. They also noted that eggshell powder, unlike lime, the more common calcium amendment, doesn't significantly alter soil pH, which makes it safer to use repeatedly without testing. Dry your eggshells in a low oven, 200 degrees, 20 minutes, until they're brittle and snap cleanly. Grind them in an old coffee grinder or a blender. You're aiming for powder or near powder, not chunky pieces. Apply 1 to 2 tablespoons around the base of each tomato, pepper, or squash plant, then water in well. Do this every 3 weeks. In my trial, the eggshell-amended bed had 0 blossom and rot. The fertilizer bed had 3 affected fruits in the last 2 weeks of the trial. That alone was worth the 5 minutes of effort. So now you've got your potassium sorted, your calcium sorted. Good. But here's the thing. Those 2 nutrients only work if the soil biology is actually alive enough to deliver them to the roots. Number 3 is what keeps that biology running. And most people are literally pouring it down the drain every morning. I need to clear something up first, because there is a persistent myth about coffee grounds that has been killing plants for years. And then I'll tell you what they actually do well. Here's the myth. Coffee grounds acidify soil, so use them for acid-loving plants. Here's the reality. Used coffee grounds are nearly pH neutral, between 6.5 and 6.8. The acid mostly goes into the coffee you drink, not the grounds. So if you've been loading up your blueberries with coffee grounds to acidify the soil, you've been doing something that doesn't work as advertised. What coffee grounds genuinely do well? They're about 2% nitrogen by weight. They improve soil structure and drainage. And this is the part that most people don't know. They feed specific beneficial microbes in the soil, particularly a group called nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which convert atmospheric nitrogen into plant-available form. That microbial activity is worth more long-term than the nitrogen in the grounds themselves. I started adding coffee grounds to one raised bed about 4 years ago, not for the nitrogen, but because I'd read a 2014 paper from Oregon State about microbial activity in amended soils. I wanted to see it myself. After 2 seasons, that bed had visibly darker, looser soil than the identical bed next to it with nothing added. I had a neighbor, Gus, soil scientist, retired from Purdue, come look at it with me. He said what he saw was consistent with elevated fungal and bacterial activity. He told me he'd take a healthy soil web over a bag of synthetic fertilizer any day of the week. Gus doesn't say things he doesn't mean. That stuck with me. Research from Washington State University Extension found that coffee grounds used as a soil amendment, not as a mulch, and not in large quantities, improved soil water retention and aeration, and encouraged earthworm activity. Earthworm populations in amended plots were roughly 2.5 times higher than in unamended controls after 60 days. More earthworms means better aeration, better drainage, and better nutrient cycling, benefits that compound over time in a way that a bag of October 10 simply cannot replicate. This one has a limit. Don't use more than ½ inch of coffee grounds at a time, and don't use them as a thick mulch layer that actually creates a hydrophobic crust that repels water. Instead, scratch 1 to 2 tablespoons per square foot into the top inch of soil and water in. Do it once a month. That's it. In my trial, the coffee grounds bed had measurably better soil texture by week 3. You could feel the difference when you pushed your finger in. Looser, darker, alive. All right. Number 4. I debated putting this one in, honestly. It sounds too simple, like something your grandmother would have told you and you would have rolled your eyes at. But the data on it is genuinely interesting. Just hear me out. This is the one that surprised me most during the 30-day trial. I expected the difference to be small. It wasn't. Rice water, specifically lactic acid fermented rice water, contains starch, B vitamins, and trace minerals that act as a prebiotic for soil microorganisms. When you ferment it for 24 to 48 hours at room temperature before applying, you're introducing lactic acid bacteria directly into your soil. These bacteria compete with and suppress certain fungal pathogens, including some strains of Fusarium and Pythium. two of the most common causes of root rot in home gardens. In addition, the starch feeds beneficial mycorrhizal fungi, which extend the effective root surface area of your plants by up to 700%. Regular synthetic fertilizer doesn't do that. It can actually work against it, because high nitrogen synthetic inputs reduce the plant's incentive to partner with mycorrhizal networks. The preparation matters. Rinse 1 cup of raw rice in 2 cups of water, swish it for about 30 seconds, and collect the milky water. Leave it in a jar with a loose lid at room temperature for 24 hours in summer, 48 hours in cooler months. It will smell slightly sour, that's correct. Dilute 1 part rice water to 10 parts plain water before applying. Undiluted is too concentrated. Last April, I had a zucchini plant that looked like it was heading for root rot. Yellowing lower leaves, soft stem near the soil line, sluggish growth. I'd lost 2 plants to Pythium the year before, and I recognized the signs. Instead of reaching for a fungicide, I tried fermented rice water once a week for 3 weeks. The plant stabilized by week 2. By week 4 it was producing normally. I won't say the rice water alone saved it. I also improved drainage. But the recovery was faster than anything I'd seen before without a chemical treatment. My daughter, she studies plant biology at Indiana University, looked at my notes and said the lactic acid mechanism was plausible. That was enough for me. Agricultural research from South Korea, published in the Korean Journal of Soil Science and Fertilizer, documented that plots treated with fermented rice water showed 23% higher beneficial microbial counts and 31% suppression of fusarium populations compared to untreated controls over a 60-day growing period. Similar research has been replicated in small-scale trials at the University of Hawaii's College of Tropical Agriculture, which has studied traditional Asian fermented plant inputs for their applicability in organic growing systems. Make a small batch every week. Takes about 4 minutes total. Rinse a cup of rice. Collect the water, leave it on your counter overnight. Dilute 10-to-1 the next day, and water your most vulnerable plants, squash, cucumbers, tomatoes, at the base. Once a week, consistent. In my trial bed, plants watered with fermented rice water showed 0 fungal issues over 30 days. The fertilizer bed lost 1 cucumber plant to what looked like root rot at day 24. One data point, not proof, but worth paying attention to. And that brings me to number 5, which is actually what started this whole experiment for me. Because I'd been ignoring this one for years, throwing it out every single week, and it turns out it might be the most universally useful of all of them. Not the onion itself. The papery outer skins that you peel off and throw straight in the trash. Turns out they're doing something in soil that even some gardeners who've been doing this for decades don't know about. Dried onion skins contain quercetin, a flavonoid compound with documented antifungal and mild insecticidal properties. They also contain trace amounts of potassium, phosphorus, and copper. But the quercetin is what's interesting. When onion skin tea, made by simmering the skins in water, is used as a foliar spray or soil drench, it has been shown to repel certain soft-bodied insects, particularly aphids and spider mites, while also suppressing some soil-borne fungal activity. This isn't folk medicine. There's actual chemistry behind it. And you're generating the raw material every time you cook. What it won't do, it won't eliminate a heavy infestation. It's not a pesticide. Think of it as a deterrent. Something that makes your plants a less attractive target before the problem starts. Prevention, not treatment. In that role, it works reliably. 2 summers ago, I had aphids wipe out my nasturtiums before they could even bloom. The year after, I started spraying onion skin tea every 10 days from transplant, before I saw a single aphid. My nasturtiums bloomed for 11 weeks straight. I watched my neighbor's plot. Same sun exposure, no spray, deal with aphids by mid-June. Mine, nothing until the very end of August. And even then it was minor. Was it just luck? Maybe. So I did it again this past season with the same results. And I added it to my 30-day trial on the second raised bed starting at week 2. By day 30, I could see clear aphid damage on the fertilizer bed's lettuce. The kitchen scrap bed had none. Quercetin's insect repellent properties have been documented in entomological research from Wageningen University in the Netherlands, one of the top agricultural research institutions in the world. Their studies on plant-derived pest deterrents found that quercetin disrupted feeding behavior in aphids at concentrations achievable with a moderately concentrated onion skin extract. Research from the International Journal of Pest Management similarly documented antifungal activity against Botrytis cinerea, gray mold, in strawberries treated with onion extract compared to untreated controls. Save your onion skins in a jar on the counter. The papery outer layers only, not the moist inner layers. When you have a good handful, simmer them in 1 quart of water for 15 to 20 minutes. Let it cool completely. Strain it. That's your concentrate. Dilute it 50-50 with water and spray directly on leaves, top and bottom, every 10 to 14 days. You can also pour a cup of the diluted tea at the base of susceptible plants once a week. Takes about 25 minutes total and costs you nothing. In my trial, this was the one amendment I'll keep using permanently, every season from now on. So, back to those 2 raised beds I showed you at the beginning. 30 days, side by side. The fertilizer bed did fine. Healthy plants, decent growth, what you'd expect from a product that costs $47 a bag. The kitchen scrap bed had earlier fruit set, better soil texture, no fungal issues, no aphid damage on the lettuce, and one plant that frankly looked like it was cheating. Here's what I actually want you to take from this. The fertilizer industry has spent decades telling you that plant nutrition is complicated. Complicated enough that you need to buy something. And sometimes you do. I'm not saying never buy fertilizer. But 5 things you're already throwing away every single week can do more than most people realize if you know how to use them right. I've been making mistakes in this garden for over 20 years. Lost plants I loved. Had seasons I'd rather forget. That's just how it goes. But the seasons where I pay attention to what's already available to me, those are always the ones I learn the most from. If something from today was useful to you, hit subscribe. I put a new video out every Thursday. Always stuff I've actually tested, never just stuff I read somewhere. Drop a comment and tell me which of these 5 you're going to try first. I'm out in the garden most mornings by 6 with my coffee, and I read every single one.